Today we are going to continue factoring, and we're going to work on factoring trinomials when A is equal to 1. And what that means is when a trinomial is in standard form, it looks like ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. And what we mean by factoring trinomials when a equals 1, that the value in front of the x squared is a 1. All right? The value in front of the x is referred to as the b, and the value before the equal sign or at the end of this trinomial, the last term, the constant, it's just typically a whole number. That would be your c value. So when we're factoring trinomials, we're going to use this little technique where you draw an X on your paper. And then what we're going to say is the factors are going to look like X plus or minus something, a number, times X plus or minus another number. And what we're looking for is these two numbers, okay? These are the factors of this trinomial. That's the format. You've seen that before in Algebra 1. And what we're looking for is two numbers that are going to multiply to give us this C value, which is this, but get added together to give us this B value, which is right here. The two numbers go on the left side and the right side of this X. All right? So when you have factored a trinomial, you're looking for two numbers that add up to B, but multiply to C. Okay, so we're looking for two factors that sum B and multiply to C. Right, and here's your B, and here's your C. So let's take a little closer look at this. We're going to factor now. We're going to factor, what do we got? X squared plus 8x plus 15. When we're factoring x squared plus 8x plus 15, our factors are going to be two binomials. Since a is 1 and our first term is x squared, there's always going to be an x here and an x here. Then we're going to draw this little x. We're looking now for two numbers that multiply to 15, but add together to equal 8. So if you're not real good with your factors, then just list the factors of 15. And you can start with 1 and 15, 3 and 5, and that's it. Those are all of the factors for 15. And then with a 1 and a 15, you can't add to 8, can you? But with a 3 and a 5, you can. So if we say positive 3 plus positive 5 equals positive 8, and positive 3 times positive 5 equals positive 15, then those are our two factors. And then we just move those factors into these binomials. So x plus 3 times x plus 5 are the factors for x squared plus 8x plus 15. Simple enough? I hope. Let's try r squared plus 11r plus 24. All right, we're looking for two binomials. Now the binomials are both going to start with an r. Two values that multiply to 24, but add to positive 11. So some of you already know what those values are, but the factors of 24, we got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6, and that's it. So if you start looking through these pairs of factors that multiply to 24 and sum 11, you can see it's right here, the 3 and the 8. So positive 3 plus positive 8 gives us positive 11, and positive 3 times positive 8 gives us 24. So we go with r plus 3 times r plus 8. And those are your factors for r squared plus 11r plus 24. And if you want to check your factors, you just do the distributive property twice, because r times r is r squared, r times 8 is positive 8r, 3 times r is positive 3r, and 3 times 8 is positive 24. And then you combine your like terms in the middle, and you get r squared plus 11r plus 24. And that matches the trinomial that we started with when we factored. Any questions so far? Let's factor y squared minus 6y plus 8. So we've got our two binomials that each start in y. All right, we need to multiply to positive 8, and we need to add to negative 6. Our factors of 8 aren't many. We got 1 and 8, and we've got 2 and 4. So we got to use the 2 and the 4, because with a 1 and an 8, you can only get 7 or 9. So if we use this 2 and we use this 4, now we've got a negative 6, right? And we've got a positive 8. So in order to have a positive 8 at the end, you either have to have two negative factors or two positive factors. And since our middle term is negative, we have to use two negative factors. So if we take negative 2 plus negative 4, we get negative 6. And negative 2 times negative 4 gives us positive 8. So our factors are going to be y minus 2 times y minus 4. Let's look at x squared plus 2x minus 15. Again, we're going to factor this to two binomials. Our first term is x squared, so our first term is going to be x in each binomial. We are multiplying two factors to get a negative 15, and we are adding our two factors to get to a positive 2. So if you're multiplying to get to a negative, you have to have a positive times a negative. Okay? Now, if you remember this rule from Algebra 1, if you've got to multiply a positive and a negative together to get a negative, but your middle term is positive, if your middle term is positive, then your larger factor needs to be positive. All right? So we're going to list these factors of 15. We got 1 and 15, 3 and 5. That's it. The 3 and the 5 are the only numbers we can use to get to a 2. So we use the 3 and we use the 5. And since our middle term is positive, our larger factor needs to be positive, which makes our other factor negative. Because negative 3 plus 2, negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2, and negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. So our two factors are x minus 3 and x plus 5. And again, if you need to double check your answer, just do the distributive property twice. Combine your like terms in the middle, and the product you end up with should match the trinomial that you started to factor. Let's look at x squared plus 12x minus 45. Our two binomials are going to start with an x. Our factors of 45 are 1 and 45. 2 doesn't go into 45, but 3 goes 15 times. 5 goes 9 times. And then 6, 7, or 8 don't go into 45 evenly, so those are all of our factors. So we need two values that multiply to negative 45, and they add to positive 12. So look, if our C term is negative, we have to have a positive and a negative factor. But our middle term is positive, so our larger factor needs to be positive. And this 3 and 15 are the only two values that we can get to a 12 with. So we got a 3 and a 15. And if the middle term's positive and our larger factor needs to be positive, then our other factor needs to be negative because we're multiplying to the negative 45. So negative 3 plus 15 is 12. Negative 3 times positive 15 is negative 45. So our factors are x minus 3 and x plus 15. All right, and then let's talk about one more example here where we've got x squared minus 6x minus 5. Now be careful on a problem like this. All right, our first term in each binomial needs to be x again. There's only two factors of 5. and that's 1 and 5. So don't jump the gun and just use those as factors, because the factors need to be multiplied to -5 and they need to add to -6. Well, in order to get to a -5, we have to have a positive and a negative. And if our middle term is negative, our larger factor needs to be negative. So if we use a 1 and a -5, well, the only way to get to a -6 would be to have a -1 plus -5 equals -6. But then -1 times -5 doesn't equal -5. Okay? So when you get to that situation, this trinomial is considered prime. And it doesn't have any whole number factors. And these are the type of problems that, as you move through Algebra 2 and you're solving for x, all right, what would your next step be if you can't factor this trinomials? Anybody remember? If you can't factor the trinomial and set the factors equal to 0 to solve for x, you can always use the quadratic formula. All right? So when you can't factor a trinomial and you need to solve for x, you've got a prime trinomial, you can use the quadratic formula to solve for x. All right, so any questions today on what we've talked about? Okay, so for today and tomorrow, I want to show you something. I am going to put your practice problems up on the wall, but if you don't get them finished before the end of the class period, they have also been uploaded here, and I want to show you what they look like. So if we go to the Resources tab in Focus, and you scroll down to the bottom, you got today's practice problems and tomorrow's practice problems. When you open this, please open. There we go. You've got a page of practice problems. And when you enlarge this or shrink it down, you should be able to see the whole page. All right, if not, then I'll make sure I don't assign anything up that you can't see. But as you can see, this book's a little bit easier to work with because your odd answers, even some of the, actually all the answers, okay? You can check all your work as you're working. So all these answers are down here at the bottom of the page. So your practice for today, hopefully, you'll use the answers after you've done the work. But what I'm going to ask you to do today is problems, we'll call this page 515. Let's do problems 14 through 19, and then 24 through 29. I'll put that back up there in one.